A Carbon Atom's Journey by Roger Vargas and Tom Plutz. Hello everyone. This is a video on how carbon from the atmosphere in the form of CO2 goes through a series of processes and reactions in order for a carbon molecule to be found in a human muscle. First, we begin our journey with the carbon dioxide or CO2 molecule in the atmosphere. Next in the process comes photosynthesis, in which CO2 is used to create sugar for the plant. In the slides before you see a tomato plant. Let's take a closer look at photosynthesis and the way plants obtain sugar. They obtain sugar by using a pigment called chlorophyll that converts the sun's light energy into chemical energy. Within chloroplasts, a system of membranes exists called thylakoids. Surrounding thylakoids is a colorless fluid called stroma. Chlorophylls, which are molecules organized in the thylakoid membranes, help give plants their green color. This pigment absorbs light energy in the visible wavelengths. The absorbed energy sets up a flow of electrons. This is where the electron transport system comes into play. Some energy is released and used to pump protons across the thylakoid membrane. These protons form a concentration gradient. The protons diffuse down the concentration gradient through an enzyme complex. This process creates ATP, and the flow of electrons produce NADPH. Photosynthesis also uses electrons from the water and replaces those that were lost. When water splits into oxygen and protons, the plant releases oxygen as a byproduct. This is the oxygen which us humans use to carry out cellular respiration. Along with oxygen, ATP and NADPH are also byproducts of the first phase of photosynthesis. ATP and NADPH are now available to provide energy for the second phase of photosynthesis. Now the carbon dioxide comes into play. It forms carbohydrates for the plant. This is called carbon fixation. These carb-producing reactions take place in the stroma of the chloroplast. First, carbon dioxide enters from the air and into the stomates. The CO2 is added to a 5-carbon sugar to create a 6-carbon sugar. This splits into two 3-carbon sugars. These 3-carbon sugars can be made into a variety of other sugars. Some become the original 5-carbon sugar that combines with CO2. Others make chloroplast or are used to form sucrose or starch. In this example, we'll follow the process of sucrose that contains carbon. Sucrose can be transported to non-photosynthetic tissues of the plant, such as the roots. Plant cells use sucrose for their carbon, for producing new tissues, and for energy. Cells that cannot complete photosynthesis use the energy already created to perform cellular respiration, to break down sucrose, and to make ATP. This is what plants are said to be producers. This is the end of the photosynthesis segment of this video. While this segment seems extremely irrelevant to this video, the child before you is now consuming a tomato from the tomato plant shown previously in this video. At this time he is consuming the sucrose, which contains carbon, stored in the tomato. Cellular respiration can now begin. Isn't he cute? Cellular respiration is a transformation of chemical energy in food into chemical energy that all cells can use. This change is in the form of ATP. The first step of cellular respiration is glycolysis. This is where the breakdown of glucose begins. It takes place in the cytoplasm. In glycolysis, a 6-carbon glucose molecule gets broken down into two 3-carbon molecules called pyruvates. This process is one that all ancient organisms used. For every glucose molecule used, 2 ATP molecules and 2 NADH molecules are created. The next step requires oxygen. It is the Krebs cycle. The Krebs cycle completes the breakdown of glucose. It takes the 3-carbon pyruvate molecules and breaks them down into carbon and oxygen atoms that end up as CO2 and H2O. Hydrogens and electrons are stripped and then loaded onto NAD+ and FAD to produce NADH and FADH2. The Krebs cycle results in only 2 more ATP molecules, but loads up the coenzymes with hydrogen and electrons, which move to the third stage, the electron transport system. In the electron transport system, or ETC, electron carriers loaded with electrons and protons from the Krebs cycle joins to a chain-like series of steps. In the ETC, a series of electron carrier molecules are embedded in the inner membrane of a mitochondrion. The hydrogen atoms carried by NADH are separated into their components of electrons and protons. As the electrons move from one carrier to the next, they release energy. Some of this energy pumps protons across the inner membrane of the mitochondrion. This produces a concentration gradient. The protons then diffuse from the outer compartment into the inner compartment. The proton passes the enzyme complex. The enzyme complex uses the energy to make ADP and 1-phosphate into ATP. The energy from NADH is transferred to ATP. The transferred electrons combine with protons and oxygen to form water. This explains why oxygen is essential to humans and other organisms. The final product is 32 ATP molecules. Carbon dioxide and water are byproducts of this cycle. The now formed ATP serves as the energetic push that starts many chemical reactions in the cell. This is the end of the cellular respiration segment of this video. The final phase of our journey is now here. Remember the baby that was seen earlier? Well, through digestion, the sucrose he consumed was digested as a simple sugar. The ATP just formed will help break down the sucrose into simple sugars. It will also provide the energy for this and to store those simple sugars as glycogen in the muscles. The carbon atom follows along throughout this process, thus ending our journey. To recap, the carbon atom started as a carbon dioxide molecule in the atmosphere. It then was used for photosynthesis by a plant which made sucrose. The sucrose was then consumed and digested in order to break it down into simple sugars. With the carbon following, this simple sugar was stored as glycogen in a human muscle. The energy for all these processes came from ATP, which came about from cellular respiration. We hope you enjoyed our video and have a nice day.